This is Charter Local Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance in Grand Junction, Colorado today. We are at Club 20. We are joined by Scott Tipton. He is a member of the U.S. Congress. We are smack dab in the middle of his district. Sir, thanks for joining us.
Brad, pleasure to be with you.
Absolutely. I want to speak with you about your district. And one day back in August, you received a phone call from a staffer. And it was a phone call that really changed the way that the district was looking at itself, at its mining, and it became a national story.
Right.
Tell us about it.
It was actually in Cortez,
right.
In our district. Got a call out of our Durango office. Our staffer was driving down the Animas and saw a orange plume flowing down the river.
What did you think when your staffer called and said, Congressman, there's an orange plume heading down the river? Did you have any idea?
You know, we suspected we'd actually been up in the Golden King mine area, visited a lot of the mine runoff, which does come into our rivers, and so had a pretty good idea of what had happened.
And we knew that the EPA was on site. We knew that they were looking to plug the Red and Bonita mine, but in order to do that, they needed to go to the Gold King mine and handle some of the issues there. But apparently they miscalculated and there was a blowout, a significant blowout.
Right. Yeah, and I think miscalculation is almost an understatement. I think it's very important that we hold the EPA accountable, just like the private sector would be held accountable. In terms of a contingency plan of if something goes wrong, what's the plan? But before you can conduct any action whatsoever, know what you're dealing with.
Yeah, do you feel as if the EPA was not fully aware of the risks? I mean, there were reports, and they've come out recently, that as recent as June 2014, the EPA was made aware of the risk of blowout. Right. Do you buy those reports? Are they legitimate to you?
Yeah, the EPA's own documents, which they released, I believe, a few weeks ago on a Friday afternoon, noted of the potential for a spill. To be able to take place. You know, we visited with miners in the region who stated that some of the actions of the EPA were literally charging that mine, building up the water, and that's a question that we've certainly put forward to Director McCarthy.
Right.
Not underestimating the volume of water that was there. Would it have been appropriate before any action was taken whatsoever to have done measurement of the amount of water of a potential spill that could happen, given their own estimate that there could be a spill? Now, that would certainly lend itself to a lot of caution.
Ultimately, EPA Administrator McCarthy, came out after some pressure, some could argue, but there was a sense that despite the fact her visiting this portion of Colorado, that maybe the response was a bit slow, was a bit overly cautious. Would you use those adjectives?
I would. The notification period was at least 24 hours.
So your staffer told you before you, the congressman, were officially informed?
Exactly. In fact, it was better than a week later before I had my first conversation directly with the EPA. We'd reached out, took that amount of time, and obviously they had important things to be trying to deal with at that, and we were aware of it at that point, but I think a notification procedure is something that certainly ought to be in their protocol, not just for our office, but more importantly for the local community.
At the same time, the local community has been nervous for quite some time about the question of mine cleanup. Right. And there's been the query about whether the site should be or should have been declared a Superfund site. There are pluses and minuses to that declaration. What's your sense of whether it should have been declared a Superfund site and a dollar's attached to that, or whether it should now be declared a Superfund site?
I actually think there's another alternative to
Please,
that.
sir.
In terms of San Juan County, where Gold King Mine is at, obviously flows down into La Plata County, then crosses a state line, going into New Mexico.
Who saw that orange plume?
Who saw that orange plume?
Contacted you.
And then the Navajo Nation, so there was a lot of impact that actually flowed down. proposal in terms of water treatment facility, I think are appropriate. How do we best deal with that? Resources perhaps in that pot called the Superfund,
right,
to be able to extract them without the designation.
Why is the designation, sir, seen as such a scarlet letter? Really explain that for us.
Let me be able to give you an example. Again, in my district,
sure,
on the other side of the Rockies, Pueblo, Colorado.
Sure.
In regards to activities that had taken some time ago in regards to the steel mill when it was CF&I that was there, some of the ash, whatnot, that had fallen down. The city, the county had requested our office to be able to support that as a Superfund site. To be able to go in. At their request, we were supportive. Now the EPA is expanding its boundaries. They're seeing property prices plummet in that area.
So the mere designation impacts real estate, impacts tourism?
Right. It certainly can. And, and public safety ought to be in the forefront of everything that we certainly do. So in dealing with it. But once you put that designation on, the impact potentially on tourism, when you hear the word Superfund,
it's not so super.
It's not so super. Many of us will think of a Rocky Flats outside of Denver. There are certain connotations. The goal ought to be able to get it done.
But at the same time, you know much better than I that there are just countless mines throughout this state, throughout our nation, that have been abandoned, that are leaking heavy metals, and the question becomes, what do we do? Whether it be a Superfund designation or otherwise, we need to get these cleaned up. Presumably, I mean, I learned that in the mine that blew out, I think it was 172 gallons of heavy metals were being released every day, every hour, I think it was, before the blowout. Then there was a blowout, it was 500 gallons an hour. They both sound bad to me.
Yes. Yeah, we still have the 500 to 600 gallons. One of the approaches to be able to deal with it is Good Samaritan legislation.
And I want to talk to you about that, if I may, because you have been working and trying to work in a bipartisan fashion. I know you've been working with Democratic U.S. Senator Mr. Bennett on this question, and so explain the Good Samaritan legislation for us and what you're hoping to gain.
Yeah, effectively with the Good Samaritan legislation, you're going to be held harmless when you're in. You'd still have requirements that are going to have to be met, safety measures that are going to be in place, but to be able to eliminate the liability.
So if a private interest goes in and wants to clean it up, what we're trying to do is create an environment whereby if they happen to make a mistake, whatever it may be, that they're not inundated with lawsuits.
Exactly, and the pushback on this is, there are some that want to make sure that whoever is doing it does have full liability for it.
Insurance.
Effectively to be able to cover this. Part of the challenge that you see is the mining interests have swapped hands. They have sold. So if the current owner of the mine in a Good Samaritan fashion wants to be able to get in, to be able to clean the water, to be able to help preserve the environment, should they have the full liability of this?
And it begs the question about who should be responsible when there are spills. Like you said, I mean, who owns the mine today could be 20 generations beyond who owned it in 1920 when the mine was spitting out its gold and silver. And so should the current mining entity be responsible for these accidents?
I think that discourages your taking on a liability, obviously, when you do make such a purchase. If the goal is to be able to clean up some of these abandoned mines, would it be more appropriate to be able to find an opportunity to be able to create a win-win rather than saying we're going to have a winner and a loser?
But if it's not the mining interest, it's us. It's the taxpayers who are paying. So
wouldn't that beg maybe Good Samaritan legislation to be able to deal with this? One of the ideas that's coming out of our office is to be able to develop a pilot project. And this would be a good place perhaps to be able to have a pilot project. An opportunity and the advantage of that is if you do need to be able to make some adjustments, you have a template, a baseline off of which to be able to work for broader Good Samaritan legislation for the country.
Feeling good about its possibilities?
We're optimistic.
You'll come back?
We will.
He is Scott Tipton, member of the U.S. Congress. I'm Brad Pomerance in Grand Junction. This is Charter Local Edition.